welcome back. My name is Katie Booth, and today we'll be talking about a story of a family and how complicated family dynamics can be. All right, let's get into it. In the story, My Family Slave by author Alex Tizone, a now middle-aged man with a family living in Seattle, Washington, reflects on his childhood and the life of someone in his life but has never been a part of his family. Her name was Lola, and she took care of his mother and him and his siblings since birth. She came from the Philippines with his family when they immigrated, and she's never had a life outside of his household. She cooked, cleaned, and took care of the house without pay and without reward for over 50 years. The author tells stories of his childhood with Lola and America and the dynamic that his family held because of her treatment of her. He returns to the Philippines to spread her ashes with those Lola left behind, even though Lola has never able to return home to the Philippines once she was given to that family. In this story, the author achieved his purpose of sharing the story of his unique childhood, as well as the upbringing, as well as Lola's story in their home. Without him writing this piece, the story of Lola may never be known to people other than the few that shared his household, those who knew Lola, and those who were a part of the author's life. The first way that the author tells Lola's story is by explaining where she came from. Lola was from the Philippines in the Tarlac province, where rice farming was the main way of life, Tizone says. Even though the Spanish were rid of slavery, the Philippines were far removed and it was still apparent in their culture, the author writes. The author talks of young Lola being young, uneducated, and penniless with nowhere else to go but into service for the author's grandfather. There, she started taking care of his mother when his mother was a young girl as well. Lola was in service for Alex's mother from then on and moved to America when Alex was only 4 years old. Lola was promised an allowance once the family was settled in America and the ability to visit her homeland, but both promises were never fulfilled, he says. Lola could not read or write or stay in communication with her family back home or to open opportunities for herself outside of the domestic duties that she had been doing since she was a young girl. Without the author letting the backstory of Lola learn who she was and where she came from, no one may never know what her life was like. Understanding the circumstances of how Lola became a servant, the story may never have been told because Lola was not well educated herself and the family was not eager to share that part of her story. The second way the author shows Lola's story is in his own as well. This author's resentment and changed feelings towards his parents treating Lola. So this is something developed later in his life. The author moved to America at only 4 years old, as we'd already said. Having Lola in this house was his normal and all he knew. It was not until moving to America that he understood that his family was different. He used dialogue to specifically talk about how he felt about his parents' talk to Lola. The author also used comparison and juxtaposition to show his family how it was seen versus how it actually was. Tizone quotes, "I had a family, a career, a house in the suburbs, the American dream, and then I had a slave." Now, this specific quote uses the word slave, and he only uses it a few times in the text to draw specific attention because of the connotation of the word being so incredibly negative. And he used that to show his feelings towards that word and the growing feelings towards how his family, and especially his mother, treated Lola. Another quote he says later is, "I was 11 or 12 when I began to see Lola's situation clearly. By then, Arthur, his older brother, who was 8 years older, had been seething for a long time." Now, this shows that also his relationship with his siblings was changing as they became more and more aware of the mistreatment of someone living in their household. Another quote is, "Mom and I argued into the night." Mom being his mother and I being the author, argued into the night. She said she was tired of working her fingers to the bone supporting everybody and sick of her children always taking Lola's side. And she wished to God she hadn't given birth to an arrogant phony like me as in the author. This was after the author addresses to his mother that Lola's health was very poor and that she needed to do something. And there was already so many stressful circumstances going on in their life that the mother freaked out and chose the scapegoat Lola to blame for everything as she had done in the past. This was another very important situation because he talked about never really facing his mother before, and this was a direct opposition of what his mother thought and showed that relationship was changing drastically. Another quote said, "I was 13. It was my first attempt to stick up for a woman who spent her days watching over me. After his parents yelled at Lola because their sister did not want to eat, they yelled at Lola and he was not having it." This is another one when the author was now a teenager, and there was a conflict between his parents and his sister, and his parents again blamed Lola for something, and he, knowing what the situation was, stuck up for Lola, and things started to turn, and that relationship began to change. The third way the author shows Lola's story and his stories, his family, is his relationship with Lola after his parents pass away and into her old age. The author says, "One day, after several months, I sat Lola down, says, 'I'm not Dad, you're not a slave here,' I said, and went through a long list of slave-like things she had been doing. I kissed her forehead. 'This is your house now,' I said, as an author. 'You're not here to serve us. You can relax, okay?'" Now, this conversation was very pivotal in this story because it was after the author had taken Lola into his care, into his family, but not as a role that she'd ever had before in his family. It was more of a grandmotherly role, and he was there to take care of her. So this conversation was very pivotal in that, and he used the word slave and slave-like again to show that emphasis and importance of this conversation. This conversation uses specific dialogue and word choice to show the significance of the changes in Lola's situation. Rather than summarizing what Lola's life was like living with him, he showed an exact conversation that showed much more of his heart. He is the author, and his love and affection and compassion towards Lola, showing that he was irritated when she would clean, shows the audience the compassion and care that he helps for Lola in his home. The specific word choice also shows the audience the depth of his feelings toward Lola and not wanting his household to be like his childhood home. Using the word slave to describe her chores puts more emphasis on the beliefs that his family had mistreated Lola for her whole life. The mention of his father also lets the audience see that he was trying to make amends because of his family's past mistakes. All those situations that he had brought up prior where Lola was being punished or mistreated by his parents, he made sure to emphasize that he was going to make amends with that. Overall, in My Family's Slave, the author tells the story of a person in his household whose story may not have been otherwise shared. He talks of her past, his perspectives on how his family treated her, and his relationship with her after passing of his mother. The author achieved his purpose of both sharing his personal perspective on his family's life and the life of Lola in her memory. The author uses descriptive language about her past, small anecdotes to give insight into what it was like living in his household, and dialogue to enhance the personality of the characters he wrote about. To him, these characters were much more than just characters. They were family, and the importance of family is truly what mattered most to this author, and he showed that by sharing Lola's story. Thanks for listening. Be there next time.